There's something haunting about the way history lingers in the stones beneath our feet, especially when those stones hold a secret as dark as a curse. Imagine walking across a bridge built over 6 centuries ago, your fingers brushing against weathered carvings, only to realize one of them isn't just a decoration. It's a warning, a threat, a promise of misfortune meant to last for generations. This isn't just folklore, it's real. For more than 600 years, a single curse carved into the side of a medieval bridge has shaped its story, weaving together fear, superstition, and undeniable historical impact. And today, we're going to uncover how those few words etched in stone changed everything. Bridges are meant to connect people, to span rivers and valleys, to bring communities together. But what happens when a bridge becomes something more, a vessel for something unseen, something unsettling? The bridge we're talking about isn't just an architectural marvel. It's a time capsule of human belief, a place where the line between myth and reality blurs. Locals whispered about it for centuries, travelers avoided it, and historians puzzled over it. Was the curse just a superstition, or did it hold real power? The answer lies in the stories passed down, the records painstakingly preserved, and the eerie coincidences that followed anyone who dared to defy its warning. This isn't just a tale of the past, it's a mystery that still echoes today. Why would someone go to the trouble of carving a curse into a bridge? Who were they trying to frighten, and did it work? From the moment that inscription was made, the bridge's fate was sealed, becoming a magnet for legends, tragedies, and even a few brave souls who tried to uncover the truth. So grab your metaphorical lantern, because we're stepping into the shadows of history to unravel a story where words weren't just words, they were a force that shaped centuries. By the end, you might just find yourself wondering, how much power does a curse really hold? The story of this cursed bridge takes us back to the late 14th century, to a time when stone arches spanned rivers not just as pathways but as lifelines. Picture a thriving market town where merchants hauled their wares across the bridge's worn cobbles, where farmers drove livestock to sell at bustling fairs, where pilgrims paused to rest before continuing their journeys. This bridge wasn't just a structure, it was the heartbeat of the community, a symbol of safety and connection. But hidden in plain sight, among the decorative carvings of saints and shields, was something far darker. The curse itself was etched deep into the stone, its letters crude but deliberate, as if the carver wanted their message to endure. Local records from the 15th century describe it as a warning to anyone who might damage the bridge or disrespect its sanctity. Some versions claim it invoked divine punishment, while others whisper of older, more primal forces, the kind tied to the land itself. What's chilling is how specific it was. Misfortune wouldn't just fall on the guilty, but on their descendants, stretching across generations. So who would dare carve such a thing? Historians have pieced together clues pointing to a conflict between the bridge's builders and the town's ruling council. Some say it was a master mason, furious over unpaid wages, who left his mark in the only way he knew how. Others believe it was a lone monk, convinced the bridge's construction had disturbed sacred ground. Whatever the truth, the townspeople took it seriously. Within decades, strange stories began to circulate: traders who mocked the curse losing their fortunes, vandals who defaced the bridge meeting untimely ends. Even the weather seemed to turn against those who crossed it with ill intent. But here's the twist: the bridge itself never failed. While other structures crumbled under floods or wars, this one stood unshaken, as if the curse protected it as much as threatened others. That paradox, a curse that seemed to both doom and preserve, is what makes this story so compelling. Was it mere coincidence or something more? the answer might lie in the one thing more powerful than superstition: human belief. Because for 600 years, whether the curse was real or not, people acted as though it was, and that, in the end, shaped history far more than any carving in stone. The words of the curse have faded with time, their edges softened by centuries of wind and rain, but their power lingers in the way historians still debate their meaning. Carved in a dialect now nearly forgotten, the inscription seems to blend Latin with older, regional phrases, a combination that suggests the carver wanted only certain people to understand it fully. Most translations agree on the core warning: harm the bridge and harm will find you in return, but the details vary wildly depending on who's telling the story. Some interpretations focus on physical consequences, promising broken bones or drowning to those who chipped at the stones. Others speak of curses that would follow a vandal's bloodline, dooming children and grandchildren for the sins of their ancestors. What makes the inscription so chilling isn't just its threats, but its precision. Unlike vague superstitions about bad luck, this curse names specific consequences, almost like a legal contract with the unseen. One line, often translated as "the river will know your name," hints at something deeply personal, as if the bridge itself could recognize an offender. Another phrase, debated for generations, might reference the sleep of stones, a poetic but unsettling idea that disturbing the bridge would awaken something best left undisturbed. But here's the real question: why go to such lengths? Curses weren't uncommon in medieval Europe, but they were usually reserved for sacred spaces, churches, tombs, relics. A bridge was practical, everyday, unless of course it wasn't just a bridge. Some scholars argue the site held older significance, perhaps as a crossing point for ancient rituals, making the structure sacred long before the first stone was laid. Others point to the political tensions of the era, suggesting the curse was less about superstition and more about control, a way to protect a vital asset in a time when bridges meant wealth and power. The most compelling theory, though, comes from a 15th century monk's diary discovered in a nearby monastery. He describes the bridge's chief mason as a man with one foot in this world and one in the next, known for his uncanny ability to predict disasters. According to the diary, the mason insisted the curse wasn't his idea at all. He claimed the words came to him in a dream, whispered by something that watched from the water. Whether that's truth or legend, one thing's certain: the curse worked. For 600 years, the bridge stood untouched by vandalism, war, even neglect, as if the very fear of those words kept it standing. And that might be the most telling clue of all. The real power of the curse wasn't in the carving, it was in the belief it inspired, generation after generation. In medieval Europe, curses weren't just the stuff of ghost stories, they were tools, as practical in their own way as a lock on a door or a guard at a gate. People carved them into boundary stones, whispered them over thresholds, even woven them into the very fabric of buildings. But bridges were different. They weren't just property, they were the veins of a community, carrying not just people and goods, but the lifeblood of trade, communication, survival. To harm a bridge wasn't just vandalism, it was an attack on everyone who depended on it. And that's why curses like the one on our bridge weren't just threats. They were a kind of collective armor, a way for entire towns to say, cross this line and you answer to more than just the law. What made this curse stand out wasn't just its longevity, but its specificity. Most medieval curses were blunt instruments: may God punish whoever steals this. But this one read like a contract, its terms spelled out with eerie precision. Part of that came down to the times. The late 14th century was a period of upheaval, wars, plagues, famines. people didn't just fear human enemies, they feared chaos itself. A well-built bridge was order, stability, a defiance of the unpredictable. So when someone threatened that stability, the response had to be equally unshakable. But there's another layer here. Bridges occupied a strange space in medieval minds, neither fully secular nor sacred. They were built by human hands, yet they crossed forces of nature, rivers that could flood, freeze, or vanish altogether. Many cultures believed waterways were guarded by spirits, and disturbing them invited disaster. Some historians think our bridge's curse taps into that older fear, blending Christian warnings with something far older, something whispered about in the villages long before the first stone was laid. And then there's the sheer craftsmanship of the curse itself. Unlike graffiti scratched in anger, this was carefully placed, its letters as deliberate as the masonry around it. That tells us something crucial. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment threat. It was a calculated act meant to be seen, remembered, feared. Whether it worked because of supernatural force or sheer psychological power hardly matters. For 600 years, it did its job not just as a warning, but as a mirror, reflecting back the deepest fears of every generation that crossed beneath its shadow. The first known victim of the bridge's curse wasn't some anonymous troublemaker. He was a man with a name, a position, and a story that would echo through history. According to town records from the year 1423, a wealthy merchant named Alaric von Holt decided the bridge's central arch needed adjustments. Not for safety, not for repair, but because his elaborate carriage couldn't pass through without scraping its gilded edges. Arrogance made him dismiss the warnings carved into the stone, even when locals begged him to reconsider. Within a week of his workers chiseling away at the arch, the river beneath the bridge, calm for decades, swelled overnight into a raging torrent. The flood swept away von Holt's warehouse, drowning half his fortune in its muddy waters. But the real horror came later. The merchant himself survived the disaster, only to vanish without a trace 3 months later, the last person to see him. A shepherd boy who swore he'd watched von Holt pacing near the bridge at midnight, muttering about voices in the water. When dawn broke, all that remained was one of his jeweled rings, clutched in the hand of a stone saint statue on the bridge. Coincidence, maybe, but here's what's chilling. The exact spot where von Holt's workers had tampered with the arch collapsed that same morning, as if the bridge itself had exacted payment. The story spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the curse wasn't just local superstition. It was a force even the wealthy couldn't escape. What's fascinating is how the tale grew in the telling. Some versions claim von Holt's ghost still haunts the bridge, his spectral hands clawing at the stones he defiled. Others insist the river occasionally spits up fragments of his lost cargo, as if reminding people of the price of arrogance. But the most compelling evidence isn't supernatural at all. After von Holt's disappearance, town ledgers show a sudden surge in donations for bridge repairs, all from nobles who'd previously ignored its crumbling edges. Fear, it seems, was the best preservation tool of all. Yet there's a twist buried in the archives. A single parchment tucked between pages of tax records lists von Holt's debts, unpaid loans, angry rivals, a wife who'd recently fled with a younger suitor. Was his downfall really the curse, or just bad luck catching up with a man who'd made too many enemies? That's the thing about curses. They thrive in the gaps between fact and fear. Whether the bridge's curse struck von Holt or he simply fell victim to his own recklessness, one thing's certain: his story became the proof people needed. After him, no one dared test the carving's power again, not for 200 years. Generations of townsfolk didn't just fear the curse, they lived by it. Children grew up hearing warnings whispered over bedtime stories. Don't run across the bridge after dark. Never take a stone from its walls as a souvenir, and above all, never mock the carving's promise. These weren't just rules, they were survival instincts passed down like heirlooms. By the 16th century, the curse had seeped into every corner of daily life. Fishermen would toss a coin into the river before crossing, a small toll for safe passage. Lovers avoided the bridge altogether, fearing a superstition that claimed relationships begun atop its stones would end as tragically as von Holt's. Even the town's annual harvest festival took a detour. What should have been a parade across the bridge became a circuitous route through back alleys, all because no one dared risk angering whatever watched from the water. But the curse's real power lay in how it shaped the town's identity. While other communities boasted about their cathedrals or castles, this one became known for its haunted bridge. Travelers' journals from the 17th century describe innkeepers capitalizing on the legend, selling curse-proof charms and guiding nervous visitors on safe paths around the bridge. Yet beneath the theatrics was a genuine, bone-deep caution. Town records show that when a fire ravaged nearby buildings in 1689, the flames stopped mysteriously at the bridge's edge, as if repelled by an invisible barrier. That incident alone cemented the curse's reputation for another century. What's striking is how the superstitions adapted with the times. When the Enlightenment brought skepticism to Europe in the 18th century, the curse didn't fade, it evolved. Educated townspeople might have scoffed at ghosts, but they still hesitated to alter the bridge's structure. A physician's diary from 1742 captures the contradiction perfectly. He dismisses the curse as peasant nonsense, yet admits he'd never test its wrath by removing so much as a pebble. Even the local priest who preached against superstition refused to conduct exorcisms near the bridge, muttering about forces older than the church. The most fascinating twist came in the 19th century, when industrialization threatened to demolish the bridge for a wider, modern replacement. The town council, full of progress-minded men, voted unanimously to keep it standing. Not out of fear, they insisted, but for its historical value. Yet private letters tell a different story. One councilman confessed to his brother that he dreamed of the bridge collapsing the night before the vote, and in the dream the river had called him by name. Whether that was guilt, subconscious fear, or something more, it proved the curse's enduring grip. Even as science explained floods and decay, the carving's shadow stretched across 600 years of human decisions. Because in the end, it didn't matter if the curse was real. What mattered was that generations believed it was, and that belief, more than any supernatural force, kept the bridge standing. Bridges from the 14th century weren't built to last 600 years. Most collapsed under floods, crumbled from neglect, or were torn down to make way for sturdier replacements. Yet this one endured, its arches unbroken, its stones barely weathered, as if time itself hesitated to touch it. Engineers who have studied the bridge point to its ingenious design. A ribbed vault hidden beneath the deck that redistributed weight, mortar mixed with crushed pottery for flexibility, and foundations sunk deep into the riverbed's sturdiest layer. These were advanced techniques for the era, the kind of craftsmanship that suggests the builders weren't just skilled, they were obsessive. But here's the mystery. Other bridges from the same period used similar methods, yet none survived half as long. So what made this one different? Maybe the answer isn't in the stones, but in the stories wrapped around them. Take the bridge at Avignon, finished just 20 years earlier. Built by the finest masons in France, it boasted twice the arches and a royal budget. Yet by the 17th century, half of it had washed away. Or the London Bridge of the same era, so plagued by collapses and fires it became a cautionary tale. What set our bridge apart wasn't just engineering, it was the way people treated it. Fear of the curse meant no one dared chip at its stones for repairs elsewhere, a common practice that weakened countless medieval structures. No one risked overloading it with heavy carts, knowing local legends warned of the bridge shaking off careless travelers. Even wars seemed to skirt around it. During the 30 Years' War, records show armies demolishing every crossing for miles except this one. A mercenary's diary from 1632 claims his captain refused orders to mine the bridge, muttering about older debts he wouldn't risk collecting. Then there's the eerie consistency of its upkeep. Most medieval bridges fell into disrepair as towns prioritized newer projects, but this one received meticulous maintenance. Tax records show a special bridge guild, funded by voluntary donations, an almost unheard of practice unless the alternative was unthinkable. A ledger from 1588 lists payments to masons for repairs with a curious note in the margin: work done with the river's permission. Even the tools used were peculiar. Archaeologists found 19th century repair kits buried near the bridge's base, their chisels and hammers wrapped in cloth inscribed with what looks like protective sigils. The most compelling evidence, though, comes from the bridge's own scars. Modern scans reveal fractures that should have split it apart centuries ago, cracks that mysteriously stopped short as if something intervened. Engineers call it arrested failure, a phenomenon where stress patterns defy physics, but locals have another explanation. They point to the curse's phrasing: "The sleep of stones shall not be broken." Maybe the bridge endured not despite its dark legend, but because of it. After all, the best way to preserve something isn't just with mortar and skill. It's with a story potent enough to make every generation handle it like a relic. And that might be the curse's greatest trick, convincing people to protect the very thing they feared. The winter of 1740 was one for the record books, a season so brutal, even the oldest villagers couldn't recall its equal. Ice choked the river, forming jagged teeth that gnawed at the bridge's pillars, while snowdrifts buried the arches up to their keystones. Then came the thaw. The river swelled with melted snow and torrential rains, carrying entire trees downstream like battering rams. Witnesses wrote of hearing the bridge groan under the assault, its stones grinding like old bones. Just upstream, 3 newer bridges collapsed within hours, their rubble swept away in the churning water. Yet when the flood receded, the cursed bridge stood untouched, its arches intact, its carvings, including that infamous warning, still legible. Townsfolk whispered that the ice had parted around it, as if repelled by unseen hands. Engineers later found scratch marks on the pillars, proof the flood had tried its best to tear them down. But try wasn't enough. Then there was the Cannonball Incident of 1809. During Napoleon's march through the region, an artillery officer, frustrated by local resistance, ordered a direct hit on the bridge to cut off escape routes. The shot should have shattered the central arch. Instead, the cannonball ricocheted off the stonework as if it had struck rubber, landing harmlessly in a field. The officer, reportedly superstitious, refused further attempts, muttering about devil's work. Military logs dismissed it as a misfire, but the bridge's reputation grew. Even war, it seemed, couldn't break what the curse protected. Perhaps the strangest near disaster came in 1927, when a truck carrying dynamite skidded on the bridge's rain-slicked stones, overturning near the central span. The crash should have triggered an explosion powerful enough to level half the town. Yet when rescuers arrived, they found the dynamite crates scattered but dry, their fuses mysteriously damp. The driver, unharmed, swore he'd seen a figure in soaked robes kneeling by the crates moments before impact, a description oddly matching the bridge's carved saint. Fire investigators never found a logical explanation for why the explosives failed to ignite. each of these events left behind more than just repairs and rumors. They left patterns, floods diverted, weapons misfired, accidents twisted into near miracles. Coincidence could explain one or two, but 6 centuries worth. Even skeptics admit the bridge's survival defies probability. Maybe the real magic wasn't in the curse itself, but in how it turned every near disaster into a story so potent it made people bend reality to fit it. After all, when you believe a bridge is unbreakable, you'll fight harder to keep it standing, and that, perhaps, is the most powerful enchantment of all. By the 18th century, the bridge's curse had leapt from local folklore into the pages of books and the strokes of artists' brushes. It wasn't just a superstition anymore, it was a muse. Poets in the Romantic era, obsessed with the sublime and the macabre, latched onto its legend. One particularly dramatic ballad, published in 1789, depicted the bridge as a living thing, its stones weeping blood whenever a trespasser defied the curse. The poem was wildly popular, reprinted in anthologies across Europe, and suddenly, travelers weren't just avoiding the bridge, they were seeking it out, hoping to witness its supposed horrors firsthand. Painters took equal liberties. A famous canvas from 1823 shows a ghostly figure, presumably the doomed merchant von Holt, reaching from the river to drag a modern-dressed dandy into the water. Never mind that the real bridge lacked the Gothic spikes and twisted gargoyles the artist invented. Drama sold better than accuracy. Even composers got in on the act. A little-known opera from 1841, The Bridge's Curse, featured a soprano singing a haunting aria from beneath the arches, her voice echoing as if the river itself were answering. Critics panned it, but audiences adored the spectacle of chandeliers rattling during the curse scene, a theatrical trick that only deepened the bridge's mystique. What's fascinating is how each era reshaped the legend to fit its fears. Victorian writers turned the curse into a moral fable, where greedy industrialists met grisly ends for exploiting the bridge's tolls. Surrealists in the 1920s warped it into a symbol of psychological dread, with one painter depicting the carved words as living tendrils snaking around a sleeper's throat. By the time Hollywood discovered the story in the 1950s, the curse had become a full-blown monster movie trope. Never mind that the original Inscription threatened bad luck, not a slimy creature lurking in the shallows. Yet amid all the exaggeration, some artists became accidental preservationists. A watercolorist in 1902, known for his hyperrealistic style, captured the bridge's exact appearance down to the moss clinging between stones, including the curse's fading letters. His work later helped historians verify how the carving eroded over time. Even the pulpy horror comics of the 1970s, which turned the bridge into a portal to hell, kept one foot in reality by recycling details from actual town records. The bridge's endurance in art raises a deeper question. Why did this particular curse fire imagination so persistently? Maybe because it wasn't just about fear, it was about consequence. In every retelling, the curse punished not random passers-by, but those who thought themselves above history, above nature, above the collective memory of a place. That idea that arrogance invites downfall transcends centuries. Whether painted as Gothic horror or Freudian metaphor, the bridge's story stuck because it wasn't just a warning from the past. It was a mirror reflecting whatever each generation feared most about itself, and in that reflection the curse found its truest power, not in haunting the bridge but in haunting us. For every villager who crossed themselves while passing the bridge's cursed carving, there was someone rolling their eyes. Take Brother Anselm, a 15th century monk who meticulously recorded every miracle attributed to the bridge, only to scribble in the margins that most were the work of drunkards and liars. He argued that von Holt's infamous disappearance wasn't supernatural vengeance, but a calculated escape from creditors, and those floods that spared the bridge while destroying others. Simple geography. The river bent just upstream, creating a natural buffer that diverted the worst of the current. As for the Cannonball Incident, military engineers later noted that the angle of impact was all wrong. Any decently built arch would have deflected that shot. Then there's the curious case of Dr. Elias Witt, a physician who set up practice near the bridge in 1720. For years, he documented every injury or death locals blamed on the curse, from broken bones to sudden fevers. His conclusion: most victims had pre-existing conditions or engaged in risky behavior. The bridge's so-called victims weren't cursed. They were statistically inevitable in a population that viewed every misfortune through a superstitious lens. Witt even tracked down descendants of families supposedly doomed by the curse, only to find they thrived as often as they suffered. Modern scientists bring even sharper scrutiny. Materials experts point to the bridge's unique mortar mix, which included volcanic ash from a now extinct quarry. That recipe, lost for centuries, created a concrete-like durability most medieval masons couldn't replicate. As for the bridge's eerie resistance to floods, hydrologists mapped the riverbed to reveal an ancient bedrock ridge beneath its central pillars, a natural reinforcement no curse could have placed. Even the arrested failures in the stonework have a mundane explanation. Iron deposits in the local limestone created microscopic filaments that acted like internal stitches, stopping cracks from spreading. Yet here's where skeptics hit a wall. Rational explanations account for the bridge's survival, but not the sheer consistency of human behavior around it. Psychological studies show that belief in the curse created a self-fulfilling prophecy. People treated the bridge with such reverence that they maintained it better than any other structure, avoiding alterations that might weaken it. That collective caution, passed down through generations, became its own kind of preservation magic. So maybe the truth isn't about choosing between science and superstition, but recognizing how deeply they're intertwined. The bridge endured not because curses are real, but because people believed this one was and acted accordingly for 600 years. War has a way of rewriting landscapes, raising castles, rerouting rivers, reducing entire towns to rubble. Yet somehow this bridge stood untouched through centuries of conflict, as if battles parted around it like water. The first recorded test came during the 30 Years' War, when marauding armies burned every crossing for miles. Contemporary chronicles describe soldiers torching villages, poisoning wells, even uprooting orchards to starve out resistance. But when a cavalry captain named Dietrich von Amsel reached the cursed bridge, his men refused orders to burn it. Some muttered about the carving's warning, others claimed the horses reared at the approach, their nostrils flaring at some unseen scent. Von Amsel, a man not known for superstition, later wrote in his journal that the bridge felt wrong, like stepping into a room where the air itself holds its breath. They left it standing, a decision that, by sheer luck, allowed his own retreat 3 days later when enemy forces flanked his position. Then came Napoleon's invasion, a time when engineers routinely blew bridges to slow advancing armies. Records from 1805 show the local garrison received explicit orders to mine the cursed bridge's arches, but when the time came, the gunpowder refused to ignite. 3 separate attempts fizzled under dry conditions that should have guaranteed an explosion. A lieutenant's report blamed damp supplies, but the soldiers knew better. They'd seen the bridge's carving that morning, its letters oddly glistening as if freshly wet. Within weeks, rumors spread that Napoleon himself, upon hearing the story, allegedly scoffed, then quietly diverted his troops to a different route. World War II brought the closest brush with destruction. In 1944, Nazi officers commandeered the bridge as a supply route, ignoring local warnings. Declassified military documents reveal a bizarre series of mishaps: trucks stalling mid-span, radios emitting static only near the central arch, one officer's pistol discharging inexplicably as he passed the cursed inscription. Then came the Allied bombers. Reconnaissance photos show every bridge for 50 miles reduced to rubble, except this one. Pilots reported their targeting systems malfunctioning over its coordinates, bombs falling wide as if pushed off course by some invisible hand. The official explanation: a lucky combination of fog and pilot error. But the villagers, watching from cellars as explosions lit the horizon, knew what they'd seen: fire raining down everywhere except those ancient, unbroken stones. The real mystery isn't just that the bridge survived, but how its presence altered battles. In 1631, Swedish forces pinned rebel troops against the river, only to watch their prey escape across the bridge under cover of a sudden fog, one absent from weather logs. In 1813, a Cossack scouting party vanished after camping beneath its arches, their horses found days later, unharmed but trembling. Even in modern times, during peacekeeping operations in the 1990s, soldiers reported equipment failures only near the bridge, their night vision goggles filling with what one sergeant described as swirling shadows that moved against the wind. Perhaps the most chilling account comes from a medieval mercenary's memoir discovered in a Prague archive. He describes watching enemy sappers attempt to undermine the bridge's foundations only to flee screaming about hands in the earth. When dawn broke, the riverbank showed no signs of digging, just fresh, wet footprints leading down to the water and none returning. Coincidence? Military historians point out that riverside soil there is notoriously unstable, likely collapsing under the sapper's weight. But try telling that to the townsfolk who, to this day, claim the bridge doesn't just stand through wars, it chooses sides, and woe betide the army it turns against. Royalty didn't just cross the bridge, they measured their power against it. When King Frederick III visited the region in 1471, his advisors begged him to take the longer route around the river. The curse, they argued, didn't discriminate between peasant and king, but Frederick wasn't a man easily swayed by superstition. He ordered his retinue to march across the bridge at dawn, even pausing to trace the cursed carving with his own gloved hand. Contemporary chronicles describe what happened next as divine mischief. Within hours, the king's prized warhorse, a beast famed for its unshakable calm, reared violently, throwing Frederick into the mud. By nightfall, his fever spiked so high court physicians feared for his life. The king recovered, but he never spoke of the bridge again, and quietly, without fanfare, his treasury began funding its repairs. Not all monarchs tested the curse so boldly. Queen Isabella of Castile, hearing of Frederick's misfortune during her own travels, took a different approach. She sent envoys to leave offerings at the bridge's base: gold coins, silk scarves, even a jeweled crucifix before her procession crossed at a reverent distance. Her treasurer's ledger lists the gifts as tributes to secure safe passage, a phrase usually reserved for dealings with foreign powers, not stone and mortar. The message was clear: this wasn't just infrastructure, it was a force to be negotiated with. Then there were those who tried to weaponize the legend. In 1522, Duke Wilhelm V declared the bridge sacred ground, ordering pilgrims to kneel before its carving as if it were a relic. His decree wasn't piety, it was politics. By tying the curse to his own authority, he turned fear into loyalty. Suddenly, challenging the Duke meant risking the bridge's wrath, a notion his spies helpfully reinforced. When rebellious nobles plotted against him, anonymous letters appeared at their doors, each bearing a single phrase copied from the bridge's curse. the river knows your name. The uprising dissolved within weeks, but the most fascinating royal intervention came from Empress Maria Theresa in 1764. Faced with crumbling infrastructure across her empire, she ordered engineers to dismantle superfluous medieval bridges for materials. Yet when her surveyors reached the cursed bridge, their report urged preservation, citing not folklore but its unexplained durability. Private correspondence tells a different story. The Empress's confessor wrote of her troubled dreams after seeing the bridge's carving in a sketch, visions of floodwaters swallowing Vienna, unless she left the old watcher in peace. Whether pragmatism or superstition guided her, the result was the same. While other historic bridges vanished, hers stood untouched, its curse now tacitly endorsed by imperial decree. What these rulers understood, some through fear, others through cunning, was that the bridge's power lay beyond architecture. It was a mirror for authority itself. Kings could raise armies, levy taxes, command obedience, but here was a force that demanded something rarer: respect, not for titles or swords, but for the weight of centuries, for stories woven so deeply into stone that even crowns hesitated to unravel them. And in that hesitation, the curse found its truest victory, not in toppling monarchs, but in reminding them that some threads of power are spun long before any dynasty begins, and endure long after its fall. At first glance, a cursed bridge seems like the last thing any town would want, a looming threat scaring away merchants and travelers. But history has a funny way of turning curses into currencies. By the 16th century, this bridge wasn't just a crossing. It was a spectacle, a macabre attraction that funneled curious visitors straight into the town's markets. Pilgrims bound for shrines would detour just to see the infamous carving, their coin purses jingling as they browsed nearby stalls. Local innkeepers, quick to capitalize, began selling curse-proof amulets, little more than painted pebbles, but priced like holy relics. And the town's once simple harvest festival, it morphed into a week-long affair featuring staged reenactments of the bridge's dark legends, complete with actors tumbling dramatically into the river, safely tethered, of course. What began as a warning carved in stone had become the town's most lucrative brand. Yet not everyone profited equally. Tax records reveal a stark divide. Shopkeepers near the bridge saw their incomes triple, while farmers farther inland struggled to compete. The bridge's notoriety even reshaped local industries. Traditional crafts like pottery and weaving gave way to a booming trade in haunted souvenirs, miniature bridges carved from oak, pamphlets exaggerating the curse's deadliest victims, even vials of river water sold as liquid curses to gullible nobles. Some artisans thrived, others vanished, their skills rendered obsolete by the demand for gimmicks. A saddle-maker's diary from 1612 laments how his family's century-old workshop folded overnight when tourists preferred cheap talismans over quality leather. The bridge's economic impact wasn't just local. By the 17th century, it had entered regional trade networks as a kind of supernatural toll booth. Merchants transporting goods between major cities began factoring the bridge into their routes, not to avoid it, but to leverage its legend. Cargo that crossed the cursed bridge gained a peculiar prestige. Wine barrels stamped with its image sold for double, as if the danger of transit somehow enriched the flavor. One particularly clever silk trader spun a tale that fabrics absorbing the bridge's mystical vapors resisted moths. His sales soared despite the complete absence of moths in the region. But the real economic twist came from what didn't happen. While other towns saw their medieval bridges demolished for wider modern replacements, costing them fortunes in construction, this one remained untouched, its curse serving as the ultimate preservation order. No taxes were levied for rebuilds, no trade disrupted by construction. the bridge simply endured, its maintenance funded by the very superstitions that once seemed like liabilities. Even the river played its part. Floods that devastated other ports somehow spared the town's docks, as if the curse had negotiated some cosmic deal. The paradox is striking. What began as a threat to harm this bridge, and harm will find you, became the town's insurance policy. When Napoleon's armies burned neighboring villages, they left this one standing, spooked by legends. When industrialization demanded straight roads and railways, engineers detoured around the accursed site. The bridge's dark reputation, it turned out, was better protection than any fortress. Locals learned to walk a careful line, never dismissing the curse outright that would risk its wrath, but never leaning too hard into its horrors either, lest they scare away the golden goose. By the 19th century, the town's identity had fully merged with the bridge's legend. Guidebooks touted it as Europe's most thrilling crossing, and visiting it became a rite of passage for adventurous aristocrats. A railway station built 2 miles away purportedly because engineers feared laying tracks closer became an unexpected hub, funneling tourists directly into the economy. The curse had effectively gentrified itself, once a peasant superstition, now a bourgeois thrill, yet beneath the commerce the old fear never quite died. Even at the height of tourist mania, certain rules held. No one sold chunks of the bridge's stone, no matter how high the offer. No developer dared build too close to its shadow. And every year, on the anniversary of von Holt's disappearance, the town still left a single gold coin on the central arch, a silent transaction with whatever watched from the water. Because in the end, the curse wasn't just a marketing tool. It was a covenant, one that demanded respect even as it filled coffers. The bridge had given the town wealth, identity, even survival. And in return, the town gave it something rarer, 6 centuries of belief. For centuries, the curse carved into the bridge's stone was a mystery wrapped in rumors, until a team of archivists in 2019 stumbled upon a ledger buried in a monastery's vault. The brittle pages contained a detailed account from the year 1398, written by a monk named Brother Henricus, who claimed to have witnessed the carving's creation firsthand. According to his notes, the mason responsible wasn't some anonymous craftsman seeking revenge, but a woman named Johanna of Metz, a master builder whose name had been scrubbed from official records. Henricus describes her as a figure of uncanny skill and sharper temper, hired to reinforce the bridge after a flood nearly destroyed it. But when the town council refused to pay her full fee, a common slight against female artisans, she didn't just walk away. She left a message, the ledger's most shocking revelation. The curse wasn't a spontaneous outburst. Johanna spent 3 nights drafting it, consulting with a local herbalist to weave specific phrases from old river folklore into the Latin text. One line, previously mistranslated as the sleep of stones, actually referenced a Slavic water spirit said to guard crossings. Another invoked Saint Barbara, patroness of builders, but twisted her protection into a threat. What the saint gives, the saint may drown. This wasn't just anger, it was a carefully crafted spell, blending Christian piety with older, deeper fears. Then came the archaeological breakthrough. During a routine inspection in 2021, restorers probing the bridge's foundation discovered a hollow chamber beneath the central pier. Inside lay a collection of objects, a rusted chisel, a bundle of herbs tied with wire, and most eerily, a small lead tablet etched with Johanna's name and the bridge's dimensions. Similar foundation deposits were common in medieval Europe, but this one was different. The herbs, when analyzed, included wolfsbane and belladonna plants tied to protection magic in regional folklore. Even more telling, the chisel's handle bore notches matching the exact width of the curse's letters, as if the tool itself had been measured for the task. But the real bombshell emerged from a forgotten archive in Prague. A scholar cross-referencing Johanna's name found her listed in a guild registry from 1396, not as a mason, but as a strigaria, a term often used for wise women skilled in healing and some whispered darker arts. The record noted she'd been banished from her hometown after a bridge collapse that killed 7 men. Coincidence, perhaps, but when researchers pulled the old town ledgers from that incident, they found a chilling entry. The bridge had been sabotaged by council members who'd cheated its builders. Johanna hadn't just cursed one bridge, she'd made sure history wouldn't repeat itself. The most poignant discovery, though, came from an unexpected source, a child's diary. Unearthed in a nearby village, the pages from 1402 describe a stone lady who visited the bridge every full moon to whisper to the river. The writer, a 10-year-old girl, claimed the woman told her the curse wasn't meant to harm but to remind. Stones remember, the diary reads, even when men forget. Whether folk tale or first-hand account, it hints at something historians now suspect. Johanna's curse wasn't about vengeance. It was a desperate bid to make sure the bridge and the people who depended on it would never be taken for granted again. These discoveries don't just rewrite the bridge's story, they reframe the very idea of curses. What if they weren't threats but safeguards, not malice, but the last resort of those with no other power? After 6 centuries of fear, we're finally hearing the carver's voice, and it's not what anyone expected. Modern paranormal investigators don't just visit the bridge, they come armed with thermal cameras, electromagnetic field meters, and audio recorders, turning legend into a laboratory. One team from a popular ghost hunting series camped out on the Central Arch in 2018, convinced they'd debunk the curse once and for all. Instead, their equipment malfunctioned in ways even their tech specialist couldn't explain. Infrared readings spiked at random intervals, focusing on the carved letters as if they emitted heat. Audio devices picked up whispers in a dialect linguists later identified as a medieval regional variant, phrases like "the stones wake" and "she watches," none spoken by the crew. The strangest moment came around 3 a.m., when a static-filled voice on their spirit box clearly replied to a researcher's question with "Johanna remembers." No one on the team had mentioned the Mason's name aloud that night. Then there are the recurring anomalies no one can dismiss. Visitors often report sudden temperature drops near the curse's inscription, even in midsummer. A university physics team attempted to measure the phenomenon in 2020, setting up sensors along the bridge's length. Their data showed localized cold spots defying natural airflow patterns, with one spot near the carving registering a full 10 degrees colder than the surrounding stones. But here's what's truly baffling: the cold never lingers, it shifts as if something moves just out of sight. Electronic voice phenomena recordings tell their own unsettling stories. A paranormal podcaster in 2022 captured what sounds like a woman humming an unrecognizable tune near the riverbank, except her microphone was suspended over the water, 15 feet from the nearest person. When audio analysts isolated the clip, they found a second, deeper voice beneath the melody, speaking in reverse. Played normally, the hidden phrase matches a line from the curse: "The river claims its due." Not all encounters are so subtle. A group of urban explorers filming a documentary in 2019 swear they saw the bridge's shadow detach itself at dusk, stretching across the water like a living thing before snapping back into place. Their footage shows something, though skeptics argue it's just a trick of the light. More compelling are the recent photos capturing inexplicable reflections in the river below, faces that don't match anyone present, some wearing period clothing. One image taken by a tourist in 2023 shows a figure in what looks like a medieval mason's tunic standing knee-deep in the current, staring up at the carving. The timestamp proves no reenactors were scheduled that day, but the most chilling reports come from those who have tried to test the curse directly. A daredevil YouTuber chiseled a tiny fragment from the bridge's edge in 2017, vowing to break the legend. His video log shows the stone crumbling to dust in his hands before he could pocket it. That night, his hotel room flooded inexplicably, ruining thousands of dollars of equipment. Insurance investigators found no plumbing issues, just a single wet footprint near the sink, far too large to be his own. He never posted the follow-up video he promised. Does this mean the curse is still active? Scientists point out that high electromagnetic fields near old stone structures can trigger paranoia and auditory hallucinations. The cold spots might stem from underground water channels cooling the stone unevenly. Even the voices could be pareidolia, the brain's habit of finding patterns in random noise. Yet locals will tell you the bridge's energy has shifted in recent years. The old fear of the curse has faded, replaced by something new, a sense that Johanna, or whatever lingers in those stones, isn't just watching anymore. She's listening, and she's still waiting to see if history will repeat itself. Scientists armed with lasers and microscopes have turned their attention to the cursed bridge, peeling back layers of time to uncover the secrets of its endurance. Ground-penetrating radar reveals foundations that plunge far deeper than medieval records suggest. Some piers extend nearly 30 feet into the riverbed, anchored not just in soil but in a shelf of prehistoric bedrock. The mortar between stones, when analyzed with X-ray diffraction, shows traces of crushed volcanic ash imported from over 200 miles away, a technique Roman engineers perfected but one rarely seen in 14th century rural Europe. Even the iron cramps binding the arches contain an unusual mix of metals that resist rust, a recipe lost to history until its recent rediscovery in Johanna's hidden chamber. These weren't just good building practices, they were borderline revolutionary for their time, yet material science only explains part of the mystery. Engineers from Delft University created a digital twin of the bridge, subjecting it to simulated floods, earthquakes, and centuries of wear. The model confirmed its ribbed vault design redistributes weight with near-perfect efficiency, but something didn't add up. According to stress tests, the Northwest Pier should have crumbled in 1689 when record floods undermined its base, but scans show fractures that stop mid-stone, as if some invisible force diverted the pressure. The team's lead researcher called it like watching a falling vase freeze halfway to the floor. It defies every equation we have. Then there's the stone itself. Petrographic analysis reveals the limestone contains microscopic fossilized algae that secrete a natural cement when wet, slowly sealing hairline cracks over time, a self-healing property no medieval mason could have known about. But here's where science meets strangeness. Samples taken near the cursed carving show denser concentrations of these organisms, almost as if they cluster around the letters. A geobiologist studying the phenomenon noted the alignment resembles microbial biofilms that form around sacred texts in some ancient temples, suggesting the stone itself might be reacting to the inscription. The most tantalizing data comes from vibration sensors installed in 2022. Bridges naturally resonate with foot traffic and wind, but this one responds abnormally to human voices. When people read the curse aloud near the carving, the sensors pick up harmonic frequencies that shouldn't be possible given the bridge's mass. Acoustics experts compare it to the way some cathedrals amplify chants through precise architecture, except no one designed these vibrations. They emerge spontaneously, strongest at dawn and dusk, as if the bridge itself is whispering back. Does this prove the curse exists? Not exactly, but it does suggest something science can't yet quantify. The bridge endures not just through engineering brilliance, but through a perfect storm of geology, acoustics, and human belief, a combination so rare it might as well be magic. After 6 centuries, the stones still guard their secrets, leaving us to wonder, did Johanna build a bridge that harnessed the land's hidden forces, or did those forces shape her design? The answer, like the carving itself, lies just beneath the surface. Every spring, as the river swells with melted snow, the townspeople gather at the cursed bridge for a ritual older than anyone can remember. They call it the waking of the stones, though no one quite recalls what they're meant to be waking. Children weave garlands of wolfsbane and river reeds, plants tied to Johanna's original curse, while elders murmur verses from a script so ancient, half the words have lost their meaning. At dusk, they float tiny wooden boats beneath the arches, each carrying a single coin or handwritten wish. Some sink immediately, which locals take as a bad omen. Others glide all the way downstream, and those families celebrate like they've been granted a year's worth of luck. It's not quite fear, not quite reverence, it's something in between, a dance with history that everyone knows the steps to but no one remembers learning. The bridge's curse has even rewritten the town's calendar. There's no traditional founding day celebration here. Instead, they mark the anniversary of von Holt's disappearance with a macabre festival called Shadow Crossing. For one night, the bridge is strung with lanterns shaped like drowning men, and actors reenact the merchant's infamous folly. Tourists pay to have their palms read by faux mystics who predict whether they'll be claimed by the river in the coming year. It's all in good fun, of course, mostly, because tucked between the carnival games and souvenir stalls, you'll still find old-timers leaving silent offerings at the base of the central arch: fresh bread, a thimble of wine, a lock of hair, just as their grandparents taught them. Tradition runs deep here, and some debts, it seems, are never fully paid. Then there's the quieter ritual, one you won't find on any tourist brochure. Every new mayor, before taking office, is expected to walk the bridge alone at midnight and press their bare hand to the cursed carving. No one knows when this started, but town records hint it began after a 16th century magistrate who mocked the superstition died in a hunting accident within the year. Nowadays, it's treated as a formality, a photo op for the local paper, but ask any leader who's done it and they'll admit, off the record, to the same uncanny sensation, the stone feeling warmer than it should, or the distinct impression that something beneath their fingers pulsed. Oddly enough, the curse has become its own kind of protector in the digital age. When viral challenges tempted teens to deface the bridge for clicks, locals flooded social media with warnings about the last kid who tried. Never mind that the story changed each time. Sometimes it was a broken leg, sometimes a house fire, once even a vanishing straight out of a horror movie. The details didn't matter, the fear was enough. Even Google Maps reviews play along, with tongue-in-cheek 1-star ratings complaining about ghosts messing with my GPS, or river ghosts demanding tolls. It's a modern twist on an old defense. The curse, once carved in stone, now lives in memes and algorithms. What's fascinating is how the legend bends without breaking. A nearby brewery sells cursed ale with Johanna's face on the label, despite historians confirming no portraits of her exist. A psychic hotline offers bridge curse readings from callers thousands of miles away. There's even a yearly fun run where participants jog across the bridge in cursed costumes, though no one dresses as von Holt. Some lines, it seems, even irony won't cross. But beneath the commercialization, the bridge still holds its old power. Proposal: better do it downstream. Everyone knows marriages started on the cursed stone's end in heartbreak. Bad harvest must be someone skimped on their waking of the stone's offering. Even the town's football team, the Bridge Guardians, taps into the mythos, their mascot a shadowy figure in a mason's hood. The curse isn't just history here, it's a living language, one that explains life's ups and downs in strokes as deliberate as Johanna's chisel. So why does it endure? Maybe because some stories are too useful to let go. In a world of floods and wars and pandemics, having a curse to blame or credit makes chaos feel intentional. The Bridges legend offers something rare, a villain that's also a guardian, a threat that's also a promise. 600 years on, people still need that balance. And as long as they do, the stones will keep whispering. The idea of a cursed structure isn't unique to this bridge. History is littered with places said to carry supernatural weight. Take the Tower of London, where the raven's presence is tied to an ancient prophecy. If they ever leave, the kingdom will fall. Or the infamous Flying Dutchman, the ghost ship doomed to sail eternally after its captain dared to challenge the heavens. But what makes our bridge different isn't just the curse itself, it's the way the curse became part of the structure's survival. Most legendary curses bring ruin, yet this one seemed to protect as much as it threatened. Compare it to Scotland's Bury Pomeroy Castle, where a white lady's ghost is said to lure visitors to their doom. There, the curse is purely destructive, a tale of tragedy with no upside. But our bridge, its curse functioned like an immune system, warding off neglect, war, even natural disasters. Then there's the SS Aurang Medan, the ghost ship, whose crew allegedly died under mysterious circumstances, their faces frozen in terror. Unlike our bridge, which thrived under its dark reputation, the Aurang Medan vanished without a trace, leaving only whispers behind. The real standout is how specific the bridge's curse was. The Poveglia Island Asylum in Italy is shrouded in legends of tortured souls, but the stories are vague phantoms wailing, shadows moving. Our bridge's inscription, though. It named consequences, it targeted actions, not just anyone who wandered by. That precision made it feel less like a ghost story and more like a contract, as if the curse had terms and conditions. Even among cursed bridges, this one's unusual. Japan's Aokigahara Forest Bridge is tied to tragic folklore, but its reputation grew from modern tragedies, not centuries-old carvings. The Bridge of Sighs in Venice, its name comes from prisoners' despair, not a deliberate supernatural warning. What sets our bridge apart is the intentionality behind the curse, the fact that someone took the time to etch their warning into stone, blending legalistic language with primal fear. Perhaps the closest parallel is Ireland's Hellfire Club, a hunting lodge built with stones taken from a fairy ring. Locals swore the structure brought misfortune, but the curse was passive, tied to disrespect rather than direct action. Our bridge's curse was proactive, a preemptive strike against future harm. That's what makes it so fascinating. It wasn't just a story told about the bridge. It was part of the bridge's very fabric, as integral as the mortar between its stones. The pattern that emerges is clear. Most curses are about punishment. Ours was about preservation. It didn't just frighten people, it shaped their behavior for 600 years, turning superstition into a kind of collective caretaking. And that's the rarest magic of all, a curse that didn't just endure history but helped write it. Human brains are wired to see patterns even when they don't exist. It's called apophenia, that instinct to connect random events into meaningful narratives, and it's the secret engine behind why curses feel so real. When a merchant's warehouse floods after he mocks a bridge's warning, or a soldier's gun misfires near an ancient carving, our minds race to link cause and effect. It's not just superstition, it's survival. Our ancestors who assumed that rustling grass meant a predator lived longer than those who dismissed it as the wind. That same hyper-vigilance now makes us pause before chiseling a cursed stone, even if we laugh at the idea of magic. But curses aren't just about individual psychology, they're social glue. Anthropologists point to the bridge's legend as a classic example of costly signaling. By adhering to rituals like leaving coins or avoiding vandalism, community members prove their commitment to the group. Those who ignore the rules, they're not just risking supernatural wrath, they're betraying the tribe. That's why the curse persisted even as science advanced. It wasn't about ghosts, it was about trust. When a 19th century councilman dreamed of the bridge collapsing after voting to demolish it, his guilt wasn't mystical. It was the weight of 6 centuries of collective expectation pressing on his subconscious. Folklore also thrives on ambiguity. Notice how the bridge's curse never specifies how misfortune will strike. That vagueness lets each generation project their own fears onto it. In the Middle Ages, punishments mirrored tangible threats: floods, famines, broken bones. By the Industrial Revolution, the curse evolved to ruin machinery or investments. Today, it might hack your Wi-Fi or crash your crypto wallet. The magic isn't in the words, it's in their elastic ability to mean whatever the times demand. Yet the most fascinating twist is how rational people rationalize the irrational. Modern engineers might scoff at curses, but they'll still cite the bridge's historical value to avoid tampering with it. That's the doublethink at work, consciously dismissing the legend while unconsciously letting it guide decisions. Psychologists call it compartmentalization, the same mental trick that lets us enjoy horror movies while knowing monsters aren't real. The bridge's curse endures not because people fully believe, but because disbelieving feels riskier than playing along. At its core, the curse is a story that refuses to end. It taps into our hunger for narrative justice, the idea that arrogance gets punished and respect gets rewarded. When von Holt's greed drowns in the river, or when Napoleonic cannonballs mysteriously deflect, it satisfies something primal in us. Reality is chaotic and unfair, but the curse offers a world where actions have poetic consequences. That's why we keep retelling it, polishing the legend like the stones of the bridge itself. Not because we're credulous, but because some truths are too comforting to examine too closely. And so the carving endures, less a threat than a mirror, showing us the stories we still need to tell ourselves. Restoring a bridge with 6 centuries of history is tricky enough, but when that bridge carries a curse, every repair becomes a high-stakes negotiation between preservation and superstition. The first major conservation effort in 1954 sparked immediate controversy when workers proposed filling cracks near the cursed inscription. Local laborers refused to touch the area, forcing engineers to bring in crews from 50 miles away, men who hadn't grown up hearing warnings about the carving's power. Even then, rumors spread that their tools mysteriously dulled when working near the letters, or that their lunches went missing if they mocked the legend. The project's foreman, a no-nonsense Army veteran, initially dismissed the fears as nonsense until his own Jeep rolled inexplicably into a ditch after he pried loose a stone fragment for analysis. He returned it the next day without a word. Modern restorations face even thornier dilemmas. When a 2008 survey revealed the curse's letters were fading due to pollution, historians split into 2 camps. One faction argued the inscription was integral to the bridge's cultural legacy and needed stabilization. Others countered that letting it erode naturally honored the original intent. After all, Johanna hadn't built her warning to last forever, just long enough to teach a lesson. The debate grew so heated that the town council brought in a folklorist as a mediator. Her compromise used reversible conservation techniques that slow decay without erasing the patina of time. leaving the carving legible but visibly ancient. Even this middle path required ritualistic concessions. Workers lit beeswax candles during the process, a nod to medieval preservation methods, and avoided touching the letters directly with metal tools. The most fascinating tension lies in how technology collides with tradition. Three-dimensional laser scans now document every millimeter of the bridge, yet technicians admit they can't fully replicate the mortar's original composition, not because it's technically impossible, but because the last known recipe was buried with Johanna. When engineers suggested synthetic substitutes in 2015, elderly townsfolk protested, insisting the bridge would reject foreign materials. The solution, a team of chemists reverse-engineered the mortar using fragments from Johanna's hidden chamber, then blessed the mix in a ceremony blending modern science and medieval pageantry. It sounds theatrical, but the results speak for themselves. The repaired sections have weathered storms identically to the original stone, as if the bridge approved. Then there's the philosophical question haunting every restoration. Does preserving the curse dilute its power? A 2019 graffiti incident forced the issue when a tourist scratched his initials near the inscription. Cleaning it required techniques gentle enough to spare the ancient letters but strong enough to remove modern vandalism, a symbolic tightrope walk. The restorer's journal captures the paradox perfectly. We're tasked with making the warning legible to new generations, yet in doing so, we risk turning it into just another historical footnote. The curse worked because people feared it. Can it still intimidate when handled with cotton gloves and pH-balanced solvents? Perhaps the answer lies in how the bridge itself responds. After the 2021 repairs, sensors detected subtle shifts in the structure's resonance frequencies, aligning more closely with its medieval acoustic profile. Coincidence? Engineers can't say for certain, but locals will tell you the river runs quieter near the bridge now, as if something beneath those stones is finally satisfied. Whether that's magic or meticulous craftsmanship hardly matters. After 600 years, the curse has become its own kind of preservationist, ensuring that every hammer strike and brushstroke honors not just history, but the weight of belief behind it. And in that balance between science and superstition, past and present, the bridge endures. Thousands of visitors now walk the bridge's ancient stones each year, not out of necessity, but curiosity drawn by the very legend that once sent townspeople scurrying across with heads bowed. What began as whispered warnings have become polished tour scripts, with guides theatrically pointing to the cursed carving under dramatic lighting, the most popular package. A midnight ghost walk, where participants clutch flickering lanterns while actors in period costumes reenact von Holt's doomed defiance. It's equal parts history lesson and haunted house, complete with a gift shop selling replica curse tablets and cursed river water in tiny glass vials. The irony is palpable. A threat meant to deter has become the town's biggest attraction, but not all souvenirs are created equal. While some shops peddle cheap trinkets, keychains stamped with "I survived the bridge," others take a more reverent approach. A local artisan collective crafts hand-carved oak pendants modeled after Johanna's tools, with proceeds funding bridge preservation. Even the riverwater vials come with a twist. Each purchase includes a donation to clean the very river the curse supposedly guards. This delicate dance between profit and respect raises uncomfortable questions. When does homage become exploitation? Is it wrong to sell the curse's story when that story kept the bridge standing for centuries? The ethical lines blur further with social media's influence. TikTok challenges urging visitors to test the curse by touching the carving have forced the town to install discreet cameras. A viral video of an influencer chipping off a stone fragment, later mysteriously reappearing in his hotel bed sparked outrage from historians and supernatural believers alike. Yet that same controversy doubled tourist traffic within months. Some locals grumble about the circus atmosphere, while others quietly note that visitor fees funded the bridge's latest seismic upgrades. Even the curse, it seems, has learned to pay its own way. Guided tours walk a tightrope between education and entertainment. Reputable operators emphasize the bridge's engineering marvels alongside its legends, debunking myths. No, Johanna wasn't a witch, probably, while preserving the mystery. But newer, flashier competitors lean into pure spectacle. One paranormal adventure company straps guests with EMF meters and thermal cameras, promising proof of the curse. Their most popular add-on, a staged hex removal ceremony performed by a medieval mystic, actually a drama student in a rented robe. Historians cringe, but visitors adore it, leaving 5-star reviews about feeling the curse's energy. Perhaps the most telling evolution is in the town's own narrative. Walking tours now highlight not just the curse's victims, but its unintended beneficiaries, like the 18th-century widow who turned bridge-themed embroidery into a thriving trade, or the modern B&B owners whose haunted guest rooms book out a year in advance. The legend that once unified the community through fear now binds it through shared opportunity. Even the annual waking of the Stones Festival, once a solemn ritual, features curse-themed food trucks and artisan markets. Purists argue the spectacle dishonors Johanna's intent, but others counter that keeping her story alive in any form honors her far more than letting it fade into obscurity. The bridge itself seems to weigh in on the debate. Visitors who treat the carving with reverence often leave with strange anecdotes, cameras malfunctioning only near the inscription, or the eerie sense of being watched from the water below. Those who mock it, their stories trend toward misplaced keys, cancelled flights, or inexplicably ruined phone batteries. Coincidence, surely, but as one tour guide put it, 600 years is a long time for coincidences to keep lining up. Whether the curse still holds power or not, the bridge has mastered one final lesson. In the age of Instagram and viral trends, the most potent magic of all is a story too good to ignore. Old Tomas has lived in the shadow of the bridge for 87 years, and he'll tell you, with a twinkle in his eye, that the stones remember. "When I was a boy," he says, leaning on his cane near the riverbank, "my grandfather showed me how to leave an apple core by the central pier every first frost." For the watcher, he'd say, Tomas claims the year the tradition lapsed, 1963, the worst flood in living memory swallowed half the town square. "Coincidence," he snorts. "You explain why the water stopped exactly at the bridge's foundations then." His hands, gnarled as the bridge's mortar, trace the air as if sketching the flood's path, a story worn smooth from decades of retelling. Contrast that with 16-year-old Lena, who rolls her eyes while scrolling TikTok on her phone. "It's just a tourist thing now," she insists, though she admits her friend group still dares each other to touch the carving after dark. Last summer, Marco swore something grabbed his wrist when he tried, probably just a rat, but then she hesitates, her smirk fading, though his watch did stop working that night. Never ticked again. Her tone shifts, caught between mockery and something quieter, the unspoken weight of growing up where every odd occurrence gets filed under curse. Then there's Frau Weber, the town archivist, who deals in facts, not folklore, except when she doesn't. She'll gladly show you ledgers proving von Holt's debts or blueprints of the bridge's ingenious vaults. But ask about the 1989 fire that spared the bridge, and her pragmatic demeanor cracks. The flames climbed the bakery next door, yes. Yet when they reach the bridge's first stone, she mimics a wave with her hand. Like hitting glass, the soot marks were there for years, She won't call it magic, but her careful pause says enough. The real surprise comes from Father Pieter at St. Michael's, who incorporates the curse into his sermons. Johanna wasn't some witch, he argues, tapping his Bible. She was a wronged craftswoman quoting Deuteronomy, "Cursed be anyone who moves a neighbor's boundary mark." To him, the bridge's endurance is divine justice, not dark arts. Yet even he admits his predecessor refused to hold baptisms near the bridge, whispering about older covenants in the water. And then there's the baker, Herr Schmidt, who laughs while sliding cursed bridge-shaped cookies into his oven. Do I believe? But my great-uncle took a stone for his garden wall in the 50s. He lowers his voice. His prize roses withered overnight. The stone went back before sunrise. Now he sells curse-breaking gingerbread, ironic, until you notice he still won't bake on the anniversary of von Holt's disappearance. Some habits run deeper than jokes. What emerges isn't just a spectrum of belief, but a living negotiation with history. The teens might scoff, but they still pocket pebbles from upstream, not the bridge itself. The elderly cling to rituals, yet chuckle at ghost tours. Even the town's atheist schoolteacher admits she takes the long way home during fog. Not because I'm scared, but because, well, why tempt fate? The curse's power lies in this very duality, feared enough to respect, commodified enough to disarm. It's not about proving whether the curse is real. It's about living comfortably with the possibility that it might be. Stand by the bridge at dusk, and you'll hear it the way conversations dip as pedestrians pass the carving, how fingers subtly brush against coat pockets where charms hide. Modernity hasn't erased the legend, it's just given it new languages. The curse persists not in screams, but in sidelong glances, in half-finished sentences, in the space between a teenager's joke and the way she still won't step on the bridge's shadow at midnight. Some truths don't need to be spoken aloud to be felt, and in this town the deepest truths are carved in stone. Hollywood loves a good curse, and this bridge's legend has been twisted, stretched, and sensationalized more times than a medieval torture rack. The first major film to tackle the story was the 1968 horror flick The Stone Watcher, which turned Johanna into a shrieking witch who summoned river monsters to drag victims into the depths. Never mind that the real curse mentioned no creatures the producers slapped on tentacles and called it a day. Historians groaned, but audiences ate it up, and suddenly, the bridge became a shorthand for spooky European folklore in B-movies for decades. Then came the documentaries, each claiming to unravel the truth. A 1994 BBC special took a sober approach, interviewing engineers and folklorists, but even they couldn't resist dramatic reenactments of von Holt's demise, complete with a shadowy figure rising from the river. The most egregious offender, a 2016 paranormal investigation series that superimposed ghostly faces over the bridge's stones and played eerie moans whenever the camera lingered on the carving. Real evidence took a backseat to jump scares, leaving locals fuming. One archivist famously wrote to the producers, "Next time, try reading the actual town records before inventing demonic growls." But not all adaptations missed the mark. A quiet German indie film from 2012, The Mason's Mark, got startlingly close to the heart of the legend. Instead of monsters, it focused on Johanna's struggle as a woman in a male-dominated trade, framing the curse as her only weapon against injustice. The bridge itself became a character, its stones whispering, its shadows shifting with quiet menace. No Hollywood explosions, just the slow creep of dread as villagers realized they'd underestimated the quiet fury of a wronged artisan. Critics praised its authenticity, though it flopped at the box office. Turns out, subtlety sells less popcorn than rubber river monsters. Even children's media couldn't resist. An animated series in the 1980s featured a talking version of the bridge, yes, really, who dispensed moral lessons to misbehaving kids. Remember little Klaus? He stole a stone and now he's gone. Absurd, absolutely, but psychologists noted it became a bizarrely effective tool for parents. Clean your room or the bridge will curse your toys worked wonders in households across Europe. The real irony, the more outlandish the portrayal, the more it reinforced the bridge's staying power. Bad movies introduced the legend to audiences who'd never crack a history book. Tour guides now play clips from the Stone Watcher during ghost walks, laughing at its inaccuracies while secretly thanking it for keeping the story alive. Because here's the thing about legends, they don't need to be fact-checked to stick. They just need to be told, and whether it's a schlocky horror film or a painstaking documentary, every retelling, no matter how flawed, is another brick in the bridge's immortality. So which version gets it right? The answer might lie somewhere in between. The films that capture the curse's essence aren't the ones obsessed with literal accuracy, but the ones that understand its deeper function, not to terrify but to remind. Whether it's Johanna's quiet rage in The Mason's Mark or the over-the-top theatrics of the Stone Watcher, the core truth remains: this bridge wasn't just built to cross a river. It was built to make people pause to consider the weight of their actions, the echoes of history, and the stories we carve not just into stone, but into each other. And if that message gets through, even wrapped in rubber tentacles, maybe Hollywood didn't fail the curse after all. Maybe it just translated it for a new age. Ownership of a cursed bridge isn't as simple as signing a deed, especially when the deed itself might be haunted by 6 centuries of legal gray areas. The modern battle over the bridge began in 2003, when a developer tried to buy the structure to build a boutique hotel, promising to preserve its historic charm. The town council initially welcomed the investment until locals pointed out a clause in the original 14th century charter. The bridge could never be privately owned, only held in trust for the people and the river. No one had enforced that rule in living memory, but when the developer pressed forward, strange things started happening. Paperwork vanished from courthouse files. Surveyors' equipment malfunctioned near the cursed carving. Then came the anonymous letters, copies of the bridge's original curse, mailed to every council member with one phrase underlined: "The stones remember." The deal collapsed within weeks. That skirmish was just the beginning. In 2015, the National Heritage Society declared the bridge a protected monument, triggering a fresh wave of disputes. Who had the right to decide its fate? The town, the state, or the descendants of Johanna's original guild? Lawyers dug through medieval trade records, only to find the Masons' Guild had dissolved in the 16th century, leaving no clear heirs. The case took a surreal turn when a self-proclaimed curse scholar petitioned the court, arguing that the inscription itself granted custodianship to whatever force ensures its endurance. The judge dismissed the claim as legally imaginative, but the question lingered: how do you appraise a bridge whose value lies as much in folklore as in mortar? Then came the real curveball. In 2019, a team of historians uncovered a forgotten bylaw from 1521, stating that any modifications to the bridge required approval from the keepers of the word. At first, officials assumed this referred to the town council, but a marginal note in a monk's diary suggested otherwise. The word meant the curse, and its keepers were the families who traditionally left offerings at its base. Overnight, elderly villagers found themselves thrust into legal proceedings as de facto guardians of a medieval threat. One testified that her grandmother taught her to whisper apologies to the bridge if she stepped on its shadow, a ritual now cited as evidence of continuous custodial practice. The most bizarre twist: some argue the curse has already been legally acknowledged. In 2021, an insurance company refused to cover vandalism damages, citing the bridge's pre-existing supernatural exclusion clause. Their actuarial tables apparently showed a 0% claim rate for cursed properties, not because nothing happened to them, but because those who damaged them tended to withdraw claims abruptly. Meanwhile, tourism revenue now funds the bridge's upkeep through a clever loophole. Visitors aren't paying to cross it, but to experience its intangible cultural heritage, a phrasing that sidesteps ownership debates entirely. So who controls the bridge today? Technically, a coalition of town elders and heritage officials, but in practice, the curse still holds the pen. Every repair permit includes a ritual nod to the carving, and no proposal passes without someone joking, "Let's not wake the watcher." Because after 600 years, the legal system has learned what villagers always knew. Some contracts aren't written on paper but in stone, and signed in something far older than ink. 6 centuries have passed since Johanna's chisel bit into the stone, etching a warning that outlived empires, wars, and revolutions. But now, the bridge faces threats no medieval mason could have imagined: rising waters from climate change, the creeping sprawl of urban development, and perhaps most dangerously, the slow erosion of belief. The question isn't just whether the stones will endure, but whether the curse's power can survive in a world that no longer trembles at shadows. Take the river first. Hydrologists predict that by 2100, seasonal flooding could submerge the bridge's foundations for months at a time. Medieval mortar, no matter how ingenious, wasn't designed for constant immersion. Already, sensors detect unsettling shifts in the piers during heavy rains, their ancient stones groaning under pressures Johanna never anticipated. Yet there's a cruel irony here. The very curse that once seemed to ward off floods might now be the bridge's only advocate. When engineers proposed raising the roadbed to combat rising waters, townspeople revolted, citing the inscription's warning against altering the bridge's holy form. The compromise, a subterranean reinforcement system, invisible to the eye but respectful of the legend. Even science, it seems, must bargain with ghosts. Then there's the encroachment of progress. The city's latest development plan calls for a high-speed rail line that would cut straight through the river valley. On paper, the bridge is just another obstacle to demolish or relocate. But try telling that to the construction workers who have already walked off the job. One crew chief's report reads like a medieval chronicle: tools gone missing, blueprints inexplicably altered to route tracks around the bridge, and an entire team refusing to work after hearing something laughing in the fog. Officials dismiss it as mass hysteria, but the delays speak louder than skepticism. The curse, it seems, has learned new tricks for a new era, but the most insidious threat isn't water or concrete, it's indifference. Younger generations, raised on algorithms instead of folklore, scroll past the bridge's stories without a second glance. A recent survey found that only 20% of locals under 30 could recite even a fragment of the curse, compared to 80% of elders. Without that collective memory, the bridge becomes just another historical artifact, its protective aura fading like the letters in its stone. Yet there's a twist: social media might be the curse's unlikely savior. Viral challenges to survive the cursed bridge overnight have sparked a morbid fascination among Gen Z, who may not believe in hexes but adore the aesthetic. TikTok clips of the bridge's haunted cold spots get millions of views, and suddenly the carving is back in the cultural conversation, not as a threat but as content. Perhaps the bridge's future lies in reinvention. In Kyoto, the Moon Crossing Bridge was once a sacred site where priests communed with spirits. Now it's a backdrop for influencer photoshoots, its legends repackaged as ambience. Could Johanna's curse make a similar leap? Early signs suggest yes. A recent augmented reality app overlays curse visions onto the bridge, digital specters that interact with visitors' phones. Purists groan, but historians note the app's script pulls verbatim from 15th century accounts. The curse isn't dying, it's pixelating, and what if the bridge itself falls? The answer might lie in the lead tablet buried beneath its central pier. Johanna didn't just carve a warning, she embedded her legacy in the very bones of the structure. Archaeologists posit that the curse was never about the stones, but the idea they carried. Like the oath of the Roman builders who stood beneath their arches as scaffolding fell, trusting their work to hold, Johanna's true spell was a covenant. As long as someone remembers, the bridge remains. 600 years from now, whether the original stones stand or not, that pact may still echo in holograms, in folklore, in the stubborn human habit of glancing over your shoulder when the river runs high. The curse's power was never in the carving, it was in us all along. 600 years later, the bridge still stands, not just as a feat of engineering, but as a testament to the weight words can carry when etched into history. That single line of text, a blend of threat and plea, did more than frighten generations. It shaped laws, diverted wars, and turned superstition into a kind of immortality. The true magic of this curse wasn't in its supernatural claims, but in its ability to bind people across centuries to a shared story. Every repaired stone, every diverted cannonball, every whispered offering was a thread in that narrative, proving that belief, once carved deep enough, becomes its own kind of truth. Think about the sheer audacity of it. A woman wronged by petty bureaucrats left a message so potent, it outlived kingdoms. Johanna's curse wasn't just a slap in the face to those who cheated her, it was a time capsule, a way to ensure her voice would echo long after her bones turned to dust. In an age when most people's lives vanished without a trace, she weaponized language itself, transforming a bridge into a monument to justice. That's the real power here, not ghosts or hexes, but the human need to say, "I was here, and you will remember me." Yet the bridge's story also asks uncomfortable questions. Would we still care about this structure if not for its dark legend? Would engineers marvel at its arches if they weren't wrapped in tales of drowned merchants and laughing river spirits? History is littered with forgotten bridges, their stones just as cleverly laid, their builders just as skilled. What sets this one apart is the story we chose to tell about it, a reminder that preservation isn't just about mortar, but meaning. The curse gave people a reason to care, to fight for its survival long after practicality would have consigned it to the past. So what does that mean for us in a world drowning in digital noise where words vanish faster than morning fog? The bridge stands as a challenge. What do we want to carve into time? Not literally, perhaps, but what stories, what values will we embed so deeply that they shape the centuries to come? The irony is delicious. A curse meant to punish vandals became a mirror, showing each generation its own fears, its own hopes, its own willingness to believe in something bigger than stone and water. As the sun sets behind those ancient arches, casting shadows that still make travelers quicken their steps, one thing is clear: the curse worked, not because it summoned floods or struck down fools, but because it made us pause. It forced hands to hover before chisels, made generals rethink battle plans, turned a crossing into a covenant. That's the alchemy of a great story. It doesn't just survive. It thrives. So tell us in the comments, would you dare test the curse, or does its whisper still send a chill down your spine? And more importantly, what words would you leave for the future to find? Because history isn't just written by the powerful. Sometimes it's carved by those with nothing left but a chisel and a grudge, and the wit to make both immortal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the legend alive. After all, 600 years from now, someone might still